I found the file on my computer quite by accident, though later I would come to understand there is no such thing as an accident when something has already decided your future for you. It was late, the kind of late where the world feels thinner, quieter, as if reality itself has grown tired and slightly careless. I had only meant to shut down my computer and go to bed, but there it was, sitting on my desktop where it had no right to be. It had no thumbnail, no proper name, just a dull gray icon and a title that seemed to hum faintly with importance. Final_recording.mp4. At first, I assumed I had forgotten creating it. That happens more often than people admit. Files appear, names half remembered, projects abandoned. But something about this one unsettled me in a way I couldn't quite explain. It felt deliberate, as though it had been placed there rather than saved. I hovered the cursor over it, noticing with a small, unpleasant jolt that there was no date attached, no time, no record of its origin at all. It was as if it had simply come into existence the moment I noticed it. That should have been enough to make me delete it. I knew that, even then. But curiosity has a way of dressing itself up as logic, and mine told me that there must be an explanation, something ordinary and unremarkable waiting just beneath the surface. So I clicked it. The video began without hesitation, as though it had been waiting. It showed my apartment. Not a photograph, not a still frame, but a perfect, moving image of the very room I was sitting in. The angle was slightly off, positioned just behind and to the side of where my desk camera usually sat, capturing more of the room than it ever could. The lighting, too, was subtly wrong. The same lamps were lit, the same shadows cast, but everything seemed dimmer, as though the light had been strained through something unseen. For a moment, I thought it might be a recording from earlier. But then I saw him. Myself. He sat at the desk, just as I was now, shoulders slightly hunched, staring at the screen with an expression I could not immediately place. It wasn't quite fear, nor confusion, but something heavier, as though he already knew something he wished he didn't. I felt an odd sensation then, like stepping one stair too many in the dark. The version of me in the video blinked slowly, then leaned forward, closer to the camera, and though his lips moved, no sound came at first. The silence stretched, thin and taut, until at last the audio seemed to catch up with him, snapping into place, a fraction too late. He was warning me. That much was clear, even before I fully processed the words. There was urgency in his expression, a quiet desperation that made my chest tighten. He seemed to know I would doubt what I was seeing, that I would search for rational explanations, and he spoke as though trying to outrun my disbelief. I remember thinking, quite distinctly, that it was impossible. That no matter how convincing it looked, no matter how perfectly it mirrored my surroundings, it had to be fabricated, a trick, a manipulation. And yet I did not stop the video. There was something deeply compelling about it, something that held me in place with an almost gentle insistence. The more I watched, the more I felt as though I had already seen this before, as though I were remembering rather than witnessing it for the first time. The version of me on the screen spoke of finding the file himself, of sitting exactly where I sat now, of making the same decision to press play. He spoke of mistakes, of curiosity leading him further than he intended, and of the growing certainty that the video was not simply a recording, but a sequence, one that could not be interrupted once it had begun. I became aware, slowly and with increasing discomfort, that the room around me felt different. Not in any obvious way. Nothing had moved. Nothing had changed position. And yet, there was a subtle shift, like a word pronounced slightly wrong, enough to unsettle without being easily identified. The shadows seemed longer, not darker, but stretched, as though reaching. I glanced toward the doorway, half expecting to see something there. though I could not have said what. The hallway beyond remained empty, the light steady, unchanged. When I looked back at the screen, the version of me was closer than before. Not by much, but enough that I felt certain he had moved during the brief moment I had looked away. A peculiar thought entered my mind then, unwelcome and persistent, that the video was not fixed, that it was not something recorded and finished, but something still in progress, that it was, in some way, aware of me. The idea was absurd, of course, and yet, once formed, it refused to leave. The version of me continued, his voice steady but threaded with something unmistakably strained. He spoke of noticing changes, of things shifting when he wasn't looking directly at them, of small inconsistencies that grew larger the longer he watched. He described a feeling of being guided, of being led towards something inevitable, though he could not yet see what it was. I felt a growing reluctance to look away from the screen. Not fear, exactly, but a quiet certainty that doing so would be a mistake, that something important, something dangerous, depended on my attention remaining fixed. And yet, against that instinct, I glanced away again. It was only for a second. Less, perhaps. But when I looked back, the difference was undeniable. The room in the video was darker now, the shadows deeper, more pronounced, pooling in corners where they should not have gathered. And the version of me, he was no longer sitting. He stood behind the chair, still, watching. Not the screen, me. A cold, precise understanding settled over me then, not all at once, but in quiet, deliberate pieces. The video was not simply showing me something that had happened. It was showing me something that was happening, something that would happen. A sequence, carefully arranged, a path. And I had already stepped onto it. The version of me began to move again, slowly circling the chair, his gaze never leaving the camera. There was resignation in his expression now, but also something else. Something like acceptance, as though he had reached the end. I felt my pulse quicken, my breathing shallow, but I did not stop the video. I could not. The same force that had compelled me to open the file now held me there, watching, waiting. He leaned closer once more, and though his lips moved, I barely heard the words over the sound of my own heartbeat. It wasn't a warning anymore. It was a conclusion, a realization that had come too late. And as I watched him, as I watched myself, I began to understand it too. The file had no creation date because it had not yet been created. It was not a recording of the past. It was a record of the future. A future that could not be changed, only followed. The version of me reached toward the camera then, his hand filling the frame, and for a brief, impossible moment, I had the distinct and terrible impression that he was reaching through it, not toward it. The screen flickered, the image distorted, and then, quite suddenly, the perspective shifted. The room remained the same, but the angle changed, tilting slightly, as though the camera itself had been moved. No, not moved. Dropped. The image steadied after a moment, now positioned lower, skewed, capturing the room from the floor. Empty. The chair was pushed back, the desk untouched, the door slightly ajar. And there, just at the edge of the frame, something lay partially visible. A shape. Familiar in a way that made my thoughts stumble. I leaned closer to the screen, my breath caught somewhere between anticipation and dread. The shape did not move. It did not need to. I knew it. I knew what I was looking at, even before the image sharpened, even before the details resolved themselves into something undeniable. It was me, not as I was, but as I would be. Still, unmoving, final. The video did not end immediately. It lingered there, holding the image with a quiet, merciless patience, as though ensuring I understood, as though it required my acknowledgement before it would allow itself to finish. And slowly, with a clarity that felt both distant and absolute. I realized the truth that the other version of me had already learned. The file was not a warning. It was a record, not of what might happen, but of what would. Because the moment I had pressed play, the moment I had chosen to watch, I had already done everything the video required of me. Every glance away, every moment of doubt, every second of hesitation. It had all been accounted for. There was no changing it. There never had been. The screen went black. For a long time, I sat there, unmoving, staring at my reflection in the darkened glass. And then, very slowly, I became aware of something behind me. Not a sound, not a movement, just a presence, quiet and certain. I did not turn around. I didn't need to, because I already knew.